We now come to the statement on Iranian state threats. Security Minister Dan Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's a pleasure to be back. With your permission, Madam Deputy Speaker, I will make a statement on the growing threat to the UK from Iran and the steps the government is taking to combat these threats. The threat from Iran sits in the wider context of the growing, diversifying and evolving threat that the UK faces from malign activity by a number of states. The threat from states has become increasingly interconnected in nature, blurring the lines between domestic and international, online and offline, and states and their proxies. In the last year, the number of state threat investigations being run by MI5 has jumped by 48%. This statistic is a stark indication of the increased threat. Now, turning specifically to Iran, the regime has become increasingly emboldened, asserting itself more aggressively to advance their objectives and undermine ours. This is evidenced by the fact that direct action against UK targets has substantially increased over recent years. The Director General of MI5 recently stated that since the start of 2022, the UK has responded to 20 Iran-backed plots presenting potentially lethal threats to British citizens and UK residents. The Iranian regime is targeting dissidents, and it is targeting media organisations and journalists reporting on the violent oppression of the regime. It is also no secret that there is a long-standing pattern of targeting Jewish and Israeli people internationally by the Iranian intelligence services. It is clear that these plots are a conscious strategy of the Iranian regime to stifle criticism through intimidation and fear. These threats are unacceptable. They must and will be defended against at every turn. Now, it is testament to our world-leading law enforcement and intelligence services that through their tireless commitment, so many plots have been thwarted, and I am sure that the whole House will join me in paying tribute to the brave men and women of our law enforcement and intelligence agencies who work day in, day out to keep us safe. In seeking to tackle this threat, we must understand it. The Iranian intelligence services, which include the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, and the Ministry of Intelligence and Security, or MOIS, direct this damaging activity. But often, rather than working directly on UK shores, they use criminal proxies to do their bidding. This helps to obfuscate their involvement while they sit safely ensconced in Tehran. We see that in intelligence, but we've also seen it publicly with the conviction in 2023 of the Chechen-born Austrian national who was imprisoned for conducting surveillance on Iran International's UK headquarters. Now, these threats are not only physical in nature. The National Cyber Security Centre has also seen malicious cyber activity conducted by Iranian state-affiliated actors targeting a range of state sectors, including in the UK. The government is absolutely committed to ensuring that our intelligence and law enforcement agencies have the tools they need to disrupt and degrade the threats that we face from Iran. So, I can announce today that we will place the whole of the Iranian state, including Iran's intelligence services, the IRGC and MOIS, onto the enhanced tier of the new Foreign Influence Registration Scheme. The Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, or FIRS, is a critical disruptive tool for the UK. This action will mean that those who are directed by Iran to conduct activities in the UK, such as criminal proxies, must register that activity, whatever it is, or face 5 years in prison. They will face a choice: expose their actions to the government or face jail. Now, the Home Office will lay regulations in Parliament as soon as possible, with a view to having the scheme up and running by the summer. On prescription, as members will know, we do not routinely comment on groups being considered for prescription, but I can assure the House that we do and will continue to keep the list of groups considered under constant review. However, what has become increasingly clear is the challenges inherent in applying our existing counter-terror legislation to state and state-linked threats to our national security. This challenge was first raised by the Home Secretary in opposition. She warned of a lack of a comprehensive strategic approach for state threats to mirror that adopted on terrorism, and the specific difficulties in using a prescription mechanism designed for groups like Al-Qaeda on state bodies. Now, we are progressing work at pace to address this challenge. So I can announce today that Jonathan Hall, KC, has been asked to review the parts of our counter-terrorism framework which could be applied to modern-day state threats, such as those from Iran. This includes giving specific consideration to the design of a prescription mechanism for state and state-linked bodies, providing more flexibility than is offered under the existing powers. As the independent reviewer of both state threats legislation and of terrorism legislation, Mr. Hall is perfectly placed to undertake this review, and we are grateful for his agreement to provide this advice. Let there be no doubt, we are utterly determined to stay ahead of those who threaten our country, and any step that could aid us in that critical endeavour will be considered. But the UK is not alone in facing these threats. States across the Western world are threatened by Iran. So we will work with our allies to better understand, expose and condemn Iranian actions and bring Iranian-linked criminals to justice wherever in the world they may be. We regularly collaborate with our Five Eyes and European partners to protect our democracies from hostile Iranian attack. And here at home, we are going further too. The National Security Act of 2023, which was supported on both sides of the House, has given the police new powers to target evolving activity. For example, the Act criminalises assisting a foreign intelligence service, such as the IRGC or MOIS. The maximum penalty for these offences is 14 years in prison, the same maximum as for a prescription offence. And I can also announce that training and guidance on state threats activity is now being offered by counter-terrorism policing to all 45 territorial police forces across the UK. This will mean that when any frontline officer encounters a suspected state threats incident, they will know what to do and what to look for to ensure that our communities are kept safe. Furthermore, we have recently issued guidance on the National Security Act and how it applies to the UK security profession, including private investigators. This ensures that they are aware of the law and understand where they might be criminally liable if they were working for any foreign power, such as Iran. We will also continue to go after the criminal networks and enablers that Iran uses to carry out its work. The leader of the Zindashi organised crime group, a group frequently used by the Iranian regime, has already been sanctioned. But we will explore further sanctions against other Iranian-linked criminals, and the National Crime Agency will target those who assist the IRGC and others to launder their money. Alongside the recently launched Border Security Command, which strengthens Britain's border security and disrupts criminal smuggling gangs, I have asked officials to consider new ways to enforce our robust immigration rules to specifically address threats from Iran. This work will focus on further protecting the UK from Iranian infiltration, including those who promote Iranian interference in the UK. I am clear that our response must be a UK-wide effort, so I welcome the Charity Commission's statutory inquiries into both the Islamic Centre of England and the Al Tawhid Charitable Trust. I've also asked officials to review where any Iranian interference is being conducted in the UK, and FIRS will shine more light on any undisclosed relationship between the Iranian state and UK-based institutions and individuals. Finally, the National Protective Security Authority and counter-terrorism policing will continue to provide protective security advice and support to individuals and organisations threatened by the Iranian regime and its criminal proxies, including Persian language media organisations and their employees. And we will continue to main funding for protective security measures to synagogues, Jewish community centres and schools, ensuring we do all we can to keep our Jewish communities safe. Madam Deputy Speaker, in a dangerous, volatile world, Britain must lead the way. And that means proudly promoting our values and straining every sinew to keep our people safe. The measures I have set out today should reassure the House and the public about our unflinching commitment to these objectives. Under this government, security will be the foundation on which everything else is built. We will resist attacks on our way of life as vigorously as we counter threats to life, whatever their source. We will work relentlessly to root out those intent on causing harm on our streets, and we will do whatever it takes to protect our country and our democracy. I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Security Minister once again for his courtesy in giving advance sight of his statement. The House should be in no doubt about how serious the threat is posed by Iran. Iran sponsors terror organisations across the Middle East. They are enthusiastic and significant supporters of Hamas, of Hezbollah, of the Houthis in Yemen, and they back Shia militias in Iraq and in Syria. These organisations kidnap, they murder, they rape, and they commit terrorist atrocities. Without Iran's support, these terror organisations would not be able to operate in the way that they do. So Iran bears a heavy burden of responsibility for enabling these terrorist actors to perpetrate atrocities. Let us also not forget that Iran is an enthusiastic supporter of Putin's murderous regime and their invasion of Ukraine. Iran is supplying drone technology to Russia and more recently, according to the Foreign Secretary, has supplied ballistic missiles to Russia, which are being used in furtherance of their illegal and barbaric invasion. There is no question Iran is a hostile state. It promotes terrorism, it undermines freedom, and it undermines democracy. And we have seen recently actions by Iran on British soil. We have seen journalists being harassed to the point that one media organisation had to, thankfully only temporarily, relocate its activities from London to New York. That is completely unacceptable. So, of course, we support the listing of Iran in the enhanced tier of FIRS. We support the government in that. Of course, we'll support the relevant statutory instrument when it comes before Parliament. And I'm glad that the National Security Act 2023 is being used, and I pay tribute to my right honourable friend, the member for Tunbridge and Malling, who I see is in his place for his work in putting that statute onto our books. But having welcomed this move, I do, of course, have some questions to ask. And essentially, those questions are in this vein. Is merely requiring registration a strong enough sanction? And I put it to the House that it is not strong enough, because under FIRS, all that is required is registration, and that alone is not enough. We have seen our allies, the United States, in 2019 designate the IRGC as a terror organisation. We saw our Canadian allies doing the same just last year, and yet I've heard nothing on prescription. Now, the Minister said they don't comment on prescription, but of course the now Home Secretary did comment on prescription in January 2023, when she said, and I quote, "The IRGC is behaving like a terror organisation and must be prescribed as such." So she spoke in quite unequivocal terms in January 2023. She then said in April 2024 that she'd like to make changes to the legal architecture And yet, that was in April 2024, and yet it's only today that the Security Minister has announced this review by Jonathan Hall. Why has it taken 7 months to initiate a review which the now Home Secretary talked about nearly a year ago? And then we come to the views of Jonathan Hall himself, because he said, coincidentally also in April 2024, that the National Security Act 2023 is good enough for the purposes of dealing with Iran. So my question to the Security Minister is this: who is right? Is it the now Home Secretary who in 2023 called for outright proscription? Is it the Home Secretary in 2024 who called for a change in the law, about which nothing appears to have been done until today? Or is it Jonathan Hall who said, also in April 2024, that the National Security Act is sufficient? There seems to be some confusion here about the government position that seems to have moved over time, and I think it would be welcome to get some clarification on that. Why is the Home Secretary not doing what she said she would do back in 2023, which is outright proscription? Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, I think more needs to be done to counter the threat posed by Iran on our shores, and the Security Minister hinted at this towards the end of his statement. Are there, for example, more diplomats we could expel who might be undertaking espionage activities or directing some of this activity on British soil? Is the police investigation, I see the Police Minister, my successor, the Police Minister, is in her place. Is there more the police could do to investigate this activity? Are we doing enough to provide protective security to potential victims of this activity? It was, in my view, completely unacceptable that the independent Iranian dissident media group had to temporarily move to New York. We should make sure no one has to move again as a result of these threats. And are we using sanctions enough? The Security Minister mentioned this in his statement, but should we be using more sanctions? I think we should, against individuals in the Iranian regime and organisations that are part of the Iranian security apparatus. And we should certainly be using levers at the Home Office's disposal, such as visa sanctions. That is to say, not issuing visas, entry visas, to people we suspect of being complicit in these activities, or indeed denying visas to high-ranking or other well-connected Iranian officials to act as a deterrent. Now, just finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, and briefly, the Security Minister talked about the wider context of hostile state threats. Now, he said in the previous urgent question he would address in his statement the question of whether China should be placed in the enhanced FIRS tier. Well, he said he would address it, and eagle-eyed members will notice that he didn't address it. So I'll ask him the question directly now, and there'll be no avoidance because there is no further statement. Will he place China in the enhanced tier of FIRS? Will he please confirm that to the House? Because I think all of us would support him if he did.
Yeah.
Well, I'm grateful to the Shadow Home Secretary for the points that he's raised. Let me endeavour to work through them because there were a number of them. Firstly, let me agree with his characterisation that he made at the outset of his remarks about the regime. I hope that there is no disagreement amongst us about that, and that is precisely why we think it's the right thing to do to proceed with the measures that I've described today. He mentioned the National Security Act, and I think he was right to do so. This is a landmark piece of legislation. I pay tribute to all of those who were involved, including my predecessor. It is an incredibly useful tool that is already delivering and making a very significant contribution to our national security. And it is a mechanism that we will continue to use, but also to build on. I thought he was perhaps, he'll forgive me if I was suggest that he was seeking to make a bit of mischief over the issue of prescription, I mean, heaven forbid, over the issue of prescription. He will understand, and it would have been the case when he was a minister in the department, that governments don't comment on organisations or entities that are being considered for prescription. He knows that that is a very long-standing procedure and protocol. He understands very well the reasons for doing it. And I know that he wouldn't really expect me to break from that long-standing precedent today, and I'm not going to. He referenced comments that have been made previously by the Home Secretary. I mean, the Home Secretary in opposition, I think absolutely rightly, identified the challenge that we are now in government seeking to address. And that is why Mr Hall, and I know that there is huge respect for him, clearly he is independent of government, he is supremely well qualified, he's a very credible and authoritative figure who is perfectly placed to look at the legislative framework and make advice independently to the Home Secretary about how best to proceed, given the concerns that we have that the architecture that is in place is better to geared towards a terrorist entity, an organisation like Al-Qaeda, than to a state-backed entity. I think that is entirely the right way to proceed. We will obviously look very closely at Mr Hall's findings and very happy to discuss them further with the Shadow Home Secretary and others, and of course we will give a further update to the House as soon as possible. He, I think, entirely reasonably made the point about what more can be done. Again, as a former Home Office Minister, he will completely understand that there are lots of things that we are doing that we're not going to talk about, and he will understand the reason why that is. But I can give him assurance is that we will and are doing everything that we possibly can to combat the threat that we all know that we face. I think he made an important point about protective security. Again, that is a matter that we take very seriously, that has been tested on numerous occasions in recent years. He will understand that the Home Office works closely with other government departments as well as relevant agencies and law enforcement to ensure that we are providing the proper protection for those individuals who've been identified as being at risk, and that the police and the security services work tirelessly to investigate those threats and to take other steps to ensure the safety of those concerned. Tailored protective advice is offered to those individuals considered to face specific threats, and where necessary, more extensive security options can be put into effect. Finally, he did, again, slightly mischievously, seek to infer that I'd made a commitment in the previous response that I don't think was quite the case. He will understand that announcements with regard to furs will be made in this House. Today's announcement specifically relates to the decision that we have taken on Iran. Today's announcement is specifically about that country, and other announcements that are made with regard to furs will be made in due course.
John Pearce.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm extremely grateful to the Minister for his statement and also his unwavering commitment to address the threat posed by the Iranian regime here in the UK, particularly to our Jewish communities. I have heard myself evidence of the IRGC operating on British campuses, seeking to radicalise our students, operating charities to pursue their malign aims, and plots to murder people on Britain's streets. Can the Minister reassure the House that the review of prescription of state threats will be expedited and that he will do whatever is necessary to protect Britain from this growing threat?
Well, I'm very grateful to him. I know he has a very long-standing interest in these matters, and I can give him the assurances that he seeks. I completely agree with him that the kind of disruption and interference that he's described, whether that is in universities, on students, whether that is through charities, is completely and utterly unacceptable. He specifically asked me about the review of state threats that the Home Secretary has commissioned Mr Hall to undertake. He will understand, as will other members, that Mr Hall is somebody who is extremely efficient and well organised. He understands the importance of this work. He's getting on with it at pace. We're keen to work with him and make sure that he's got all the support that he requires, but I anticipate that he will be able to complete that work quickly.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister for advanced sight of his statement. The Liberal Democrats, of course, welcome the steps he has outlined and recognise, as he says, the existential threat that Iran now poses not only to Israel, but to Western democracies, including ourselves here in the UK. And last year, as he said, the head of MI5, Ken McCallum, laid bare this very serious threat, with Iran and other nations such as Russia intensifying their efforts to interfere in British life, all aspects of it, including the 20 plots backed by the emboldened, as he described them, Iranian government that MI5 have identified in the past 3 years. Of course, we welcome the placing of the whole Iranian state on the FIR's enhanced tier, and that will include Iran's Revolutionary Guard, as he said, who are a vital part of the infrastructure that makes Iran's government such a threat, acting as it does with impunity and supplying terrorist groups such as Hezbollah and contributing so much to the tension and violence across the Middle East. If we are to achieve lasting peace, it is also essential to curtail the influence and threat of Iran to the West. We would, welcome the review by Mr Hall which has been outlined, and I'm glad to hear that the Government is continuing to keep the list of proscribed groups under review, but I hope that a decision on the IRGC will come sooner rather than later. I would like to hear mention of how we will strengthen sanctions on regimes, the sanction regimes, now to start tackling the influence of Iran. And the measures announced today are a welcome start, but we would stand ready to support these sanctions, and I hope the Government will go further and faster. I'm also pleased to see the Government working closely with territorial police forces across the United Kingdom to give officers at all levels the skills and confidence to identify these threats on our own shores, particularly the threats to the communities that remain vulnerable. So I also welcome the reference to the threat faced by our Jewish communities across the country and the tension that is rising on our streets. And I hope the Minister is able to outline how his department will work with the CST and other groups to keep all Jewish communities safe at a time when those abroad are seeking to undermine all of us and our whole country. We must not let them succeed. Thank you.
Well, I'm very grateful to her, and she's absolutely right. We must not let them succeed, and we won't. She's also completely right about the existential nature of the threat and the 20 plots that she referenced that originates from the Director General MI5's threat lecture towards the end of last year, I think really do illustrate the scale of the challenge. I'm grateful for her support for the specific announcement today around FIRS. I'm grateful for her acknowledgement of the work that we're seeking to do with regard to Mr Hall and him looking very carefully at the legislative framework. And I can say to her that in terms of matters relating to prescription, we do keep these matters under absolute constant review. She's right to mention sanctions. I can give her an assurance that we work incredibly closely with partners in the FCDO. And I'm grateful, as I know that other members will be as well, for her referencing of the importance of ensuring that we work cross-party to protect Jewish communities right around the country. She mentioned the Community Security Trust. They are an organisation that will be well known to members right across this House. They are incredibly professional, and they are an organisation that delivers massive value to communities right around the country, and we will continue to work very closely with them. Just want to briefly make one further reference. I spoke earlier on about the landmark nature of the National Security Act. It is a measure for which we are truly grateful. I do also want to take the opportunity just to acknowledge the contribution that was made by the Right Honourable Member for Hampshire East for his work in introducing that landmark legislation. It is not forgotten.
Jardine.
Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Minister for his statement today and welcome the action that this government is taking to counter the malign influence of Iran on Britain's streets. Given the wide range of threats from hostile state actors, including Iran, it's critical that we take effective action to protect critical national infrastructure from cyber attacks. Therefore, can I ask the Minister to update us on plans announced in the King's Speech last year for a new bill on cyber resilience and the other action being taken to improve our protections in this area?
I'm grateful to him because I think he raises a very important threat vector which is not often commented on. Let me say what I can tell him. I can tell him that the National Cyber Security Centre assessed that Iran is an aggressive and capable cyber actor with a number of powerful disruptive and destructive tools at their disposal. Now, as I think he will understand, the NCSC continues to work closely with government, industry and international partners to mitigate the cyber threat from Iran. It's something that we take very seriously and that we're working across government to counter.
Sir Julian Lewis.
Does the Minister agree with me that this is at least one area where our cooperation with the United States can continue on a basis of a common mutual interest, given President Trump's extremely strong attitude in relation to the abuses carried out by the Iranian regime? And is he aware, as I think he probably is, that the Intelligence and Security Committee during the last Parliament completed the classified version of a major report on Iran and all its activities? And does he look forward, like me, to the redaction process being completed soon so that we can all benefit from the findings of that report?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful, as I always am, to the Right Honourable Gentleman, because he always adds a significant amount of wisdom to proceedings, and I appreciate it. I do agree with him about the importance of our relationship with the United States. I agree with him that we absolutely have a common mutual interest with colleagues in the new administration. It was a matter that the Prime Minister discussed with President Trump on his recent visit to Washington. I can tell him that I am aware of the report that he references in the previous Parliament from the Intelligence and Security Committee. I can also say to him that I've written to the committee this morning outlining the measures that I have announced today. But I look forward to working closely with them to make sure that we are able collectively to derive the benefits of the report that he mentions. And I'm grateful to him and previous members for the work that they have done.
Joe Powell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Minister for his reference to money laundering in his statement. He will know full well the extent to which Iran uses illicit financial networks to evade sanctions and fund hostile activities. So can the Minister give an update on what the government is doing to follow the money, disrupt those money laundering networks, particularly those used by proxies and enablers in the UK?
Well, I'm very grateful to him for his question and also for the important work that he does through the all-party parliamentary group. He's absolutely right that illicit finance does fund hostile activities. It's something that this government takes incredibly seriously. That is why we have appointed Baroness Hodge as the anti-corruption champion. That is why we are in the process of producing an anti-corruption strategy, and the government intends to publish that before the summer recess. That is why I have recently visited the United Arab Emirates, because the nature of this particular challenge requires an international response. And that is why the UK is seeking to work with our international partners to do everything that we can to tighten the screw against those who would seek to use illicit finance to fund terrorist activity. It is a priority for this government. We're grateful for the support and the work that he does. We're grateful for the work that Baroness Hodge does, and we will continue it at pace.
Tom Tugendhat.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And may I first of all pay tribute to my honourable friend and Minister for the work he is doing on leading this fight against a hostile state that is doing so much against us. May I also join him in paying tribute not just to Jonathan Hall, who did amazingly good work for us in government, and I'm sure we'll be serving him with the same dedication and diligence. And also, of course, to MI5, whose leadership under Sir Ken McCullum has begun to put some real focus onto areas where previously some of those areas had slipped by. But will he not also recognise with me that this isn't just a domestic challenge? And while I recognise all that he has set out, this is really a matter that we need to be working on with friends and allies. Because the truth is, the pressures that we're seeing in Iran today, the failure of the state, the emergence of a civil society, and perhaps even, let's hope, the destruction of that dreadful regime that has occupied that country and tortured those people for so many years, means that this is a whole-of-government response, and we are feeling the effects of it here in the United Kingdom because the poison is seeping out of Tehran.
Well, I'm very grateful to him for the work that he's done previously and for the support that I know that he's provided. I completely agree with what he said about Jonathan Hall. Jonathan Hall is a figure of great integrity and authority. We are lucky to have him, and we benefit hugely from the advice and the support that he provides in his own and very independent way. I also completely agree with what he said about the leadership of MI5. We don't say a lot about them in this House for understandable reasons. They do extraordinary work, and again, we should be very grateful to them for their service. He's completely right. This is, of course, just a domestic challenge. It is a challenge that requires an international coalition of the willing, and we need to be working incredibly closely with our partners, with the US, with our partners in Europe and partners in the region as well. That is work that we are progressing with colleagues in the Foreign Office. That is a matter that he knows. I know he reflected on the Prime Minister's statement yesterday that the Prime Minister personally takes very seriously. These are the most profoundly important matters. We take them incredibly seriously, and we're working across government and with our partners to address them.
Mark Sewards.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the action that the Minister is taking to combat Iranian state threats on our streets. Now, in his statement, he said that there was a long-standing pattern of targeting Jewish and Israeli people by the Iranian intelligence services, and while certainly no secret, it is still very concerning for the community involved. Now, I absolutely welcome when he set out that we're going to maintain funding for protective security measures around synagogues, community centres and schools. But given the seriousness of this situation, can he set out in more detail how this government are going to protect the Jewish community in the UK from these threats and others?
I'm grateful to him. I think he makes a very important point that I know will be shared right across the House. I said in my opening remarks the importance that we attach to ensuring that all communities in our country aren't just safe, but feel as if they are safe. And he's absolutely right to reference the importance of ensuring that our Jewish communities feel that they are both properly valued and properly protected. He will know that I've already referenced the importance of the work that is done by the Community Security Trust. We've made a significant financial commitment to them to support the important work that they do. I have written to them today and will be meeting with them, I hope, in the very near future. They do extraordinary work. We are very grateful for it, and I'm very happy to take the opportunity to reassure him and all members of our continued commitment to work with them in the future.
Damien Hines.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I welcome what the Security Minister has said today about the inclusion of Iran in the enhanced tier of FIRS. And can he confirm, I hope this is also something the ISC may look at over time, that as this system operationalises, it will also cover more complex situations where it's not as straightforward as somebody taking an instruction from an organ of that state or from some other organisation included in FIRS, or indeed situations where there is no actual instruction or relationship at all, but somebody choosing to act on that organ's behalf?
Well, I'm grateful to him for the previous work that he's done. I think he makes an important point, and I can absolutely give him the assurances that he seeks. We will have much more to say about it in the future, but I hope he recognises that today marks a significant step forward. This is a measure that was introduced by the previous government. We think it is the right way to proceed, and we are seeking to progress it at pace.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Minister's statement, and I'm confident that my honourable friend will agree with me that this House, the government and indeed the country bears no animosity towards the Iranian people, but that it is the actions of the Iranian state that we are deeply concerned about and are taking action about. And in that regard, I wonder if he would give me more detail on the training that may be available for our police officers who often have to counter the actions of the Iranian state on our streets in constituencies around the country.
I'm grateful to him. I think he makes two really important points. I completely agree with the point he made about the Iranian people. This is not about them. This is about the targeted activity of the Iranian state. And we are absolutely clear that these measures that we've announced today are specifically for those state entities, not for the people of Iran. He made an important point about police training, and I was able to confirm earlier on in my introductory remarks about the work that's taking place by counter-terrorism police, working with all of our territorial police forces right around the country. That is work that is already underway. It is absolutely essential that police officers on the beat wherever they may be, have the training that they need to spot and more effectively understand some of the risks and some of the threats that some of our citizens are subjected to. That is relatively new work. It is being progressed at pace, and I'm grateful both to counter-terrorism police and the police forces right around the country for their commitment to it.
Sarah Olney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's been a privilege and an honour to engage with my many Iranian constituents over the years. But I'm always filled with horror when they tell me some of the stories, both of what's happening to their families and friends back home in Iran, particularly the oppression still suffered by many women in Iran, but also the stories they tell me about their experiences in this country. So I very much welcome the measures outlined by the Minister today, particularly around training for the police, and I know that that will make a big difference to my constituents. I just wanted to raise a particular issue that they often raise with me, and I know is one of the biggest issues for British Iranians living in this country, and that's around banking. And while I very much welcome the Minister's response to the member for, I think it was Kensington Bayswater, talking about money laundering, can I ask the Minister to ensure that for those British Iranians who are living here, who've been living here for many years, they often find that their bank accounts are frozen and leaving them in considerable financial hardship because some of these banking restrictions are just imposed without discrimination. And if he could speak a bit more about what British Iranians what reassurance he can give to my constituents about their abilities to continue banking without restriction. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm very grateful to her for the points that she made and for the referencing of the work that we're doing to ensure that the police officers, wherever they are in the country, have the requisite knowledge and experience in order to handle these matters when they account with them. I think she made a really good practical point about the issue relating to frozen accounts and banking arrangements for British Iranians. Let me take that away and I will come back to her. She'll recall that I mentioned earlier on the work that's being done through the Defending Democracy Task Force, reviewing the issue of transnational repression. We're looking very carefully at what more we can do in this area, and I will take away the particular point that she's made with regard to banking, and I'm grateful for it.
Dan Tomlinson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is very welcome that the Minister is taking such strong action to counter the threat posed by Iran on Britain's streets. But can he explain how the process outlined to consider a prescription-style framework to tackle the IRGC will work?
What I can say to him is that in opposition, the Home Secretary rightly didn't think that the existing legislative architecture was necessarily appropriate. And it's the challenge of having a terrorist entity like Al-Qaeda and ensuring that a mechanism that might be used to prescribe a state entity is going to work in the same effective way. So in order to seek advice, the Home Secretary has commissioned Jonathan Hall to look very carefully at this. As I think the Honourable Member may have heard me say, he is someone who is superbly well qualified to do this work. He's working at pace with it, and we will have more to say about it in the near future.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Very much welcome the statement. The Minister is absolutely right to underscore the interconnected nature of the threats we face from malign state actors. It's what George W. Bush called the axis of evil. Given events in the US recently and the apparent distancing of Washington from some of its allies and an alignment perhaps with President Putin, and noting the strong connection between Tehran and Moscow, does the Minister share my concern that America may not fully have understood the connection between the two, and what conversations will he and his colleagues be having with the US around the need for them to distance themselves entirely and cauterize their relationship so far as that nexus between Tehran and Moscow is concerned?
Well, I'm grateful to him, as I always am. He always asks challenging questions, and I completely agree with the point that he made about the interconnected nature of the threat. He's absolutely right in his assessment there. I would just sort of say to him, as a very experienced member of this House and as a former minister, he will understand that I need to choose my words incredibly carefully. And therefore, I think what I will say is, as he will understand, we place huge emphasis on the importance of the relationship with the United States. That's why the Prime Minister was in Washington just recently meeting with President Trump. He will understand from his previous ministerial service the huge importance and the value of the operational partnerships that we have with the US in the wider context of the Five Eyes arrangements. These are hugely valuable linkages and we benefit hugely from them. We, as a relatively new government, are still investing in those relationships to ensure that we get the most out of them, and we will work very closely with our new US allies to target what he rightly has described as the interconnected nature of the threat from the countries that he knows all about.
Sir Alex Shelbrooke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the statement by the Minister today. And of course, the Israelis have done a huge amount to dismantle the influence of Iran across many aspects of the Middle East. So could I ask the Minister that he ensures that we carry on giving Israel the support to make sure Iran is not able to re-establish itself, Hezbollah, Hamas in some of these areas, and also to make sure that British companies aren't, through a series of countries that they can trade with, supplying components to Iran, and that we make sure that whole supply chain is actually make sure we can achieve the objectives we have.
Well, I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman. He makes important points. He's absolutely right in terms of the importance that he attaches to our relationships with partners in the Middle East. These are relationships that we invest heavily in, and they are in our own national interest to do so. But he also, I thought, made a very good point about supply chains. I can give him that assurance, but it's a good point, and I will think further on it.
Good.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the content and nature of the statement from the Minister. He says in that he's considering new ways to enforce our robust immigration rules to specifically address threats from Iran. Can he flesh out a little bit what that means specifically with regard to what the government's stance is on proscription of the IRGC? I know he's reluctant to talk about that, but maybe he could sense the frustration among honourable and right honourable members that there's zero context given and the government stands behind this veil of obscurity as regards how that might happen. And he speaks appropriately about the protections that will be afforded in this statement to members of the Jewish community in the United Kingdom, quite rightly too. And he spoke previously in the urgent question about the protections that will be afforded by the UK state to Hong Kongers from foreign state actors acting against their best interests. Can he speak to the House today about what the UK state will do to protect Iranians and Persians living in the UK who are the subject of malign foreign state action against their interests? Thank you.
I'm grateful to him. There's quite a lot in his questions. I hope that I've given him a sense with regard to prescription of the importance that we attach to the work that the Home Secretary has commissioned. I think it's entirely reasonable for the government to say that we've looked at the existing legislative framework and decided that we need an independent reviewer and some independent advice to guide us as to whether it is most appropriate for the state threats that undoubtedly we face. I think that's the right way to proceed. And I hope that he does understand that no government would ever really get into a running commentary with regard to prescription. That isn't helpful and undermines the deterrent effect of that particular tool. He made an important point about ensuring that as a government that we do everything that we possibly can to protect those Iranian people currently residing in the UK. I can give him those assurances. Hopefully he's heard the words that I spoke earlier on about the work that the Defending Democracy Task Force is progressing and the Transnational Repression Review. That is an important piece of work. It has been a process that has taken some time, but it should provide the mechanisms by which government can most effectively ensure that people in this country are protected from the kind of threats that we've been discussing today.
Sir David Davis.
I know I've bored the Minister incessantly with my repetitive calls for the proscription of the IRGC, so I welcome what he has to say today, in particular the Independent Advisor's review, which I hope will be rapidly available for him to take action. But can I pick up the issue raised by my right honourable friend about this being a whole-of-government response? This isn't just the Foreign Office as well as the Home Office. It's wider than that. I mean, I'll give him a single example, I could give him a number. Progressive or successive British governments have stood aside whilst British universities have done military research in conjunction with Iranian researchers on battlefield armour, on range-finding lasers, on drones and fighter jets. Will he ensure that the whole of Whitehall brings the focus of this that is required?
Well, firstly, let me say to the right honourable gentleman that he's never bored me. Although I sense, Madam Deputy Speaker, that not everyone in the chamber would be able to say precisely those same words, but I can say them and look the right honourable gentleman in the face. He's right to mention the Jonathan Hall work. He will know that Jonathan Hall is not an individual who sits on his hands and will work at pace. We do need to get a move on with this, and I can give an assurance that we will, and work will progress at rapid pace. Finally, his point about wider government is exactly right. There is an important role for the DFE. The Defending Democracy Task Force that was set up by the previous government, which I now chair, brings together virtually all of the government departments, as well as a number of other operational partners. So that fulcrum point across government, which looks at these matters, very much does have that wider government approach, which I think he's absolutely right to raise.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for his statement, which is reassuring that the government is not losing sight of all the other threats that are facing the United Kingdom and our allies. Can I very much praise and endorse his comments about how our relationship with the United States is far, far deeper and more integrated in defence and security on many, many facets that go well beyond any disagreements we have with the present White House and will endure. But finally, can I just warn him that while we've been on our feet, President Putin has made overtures to the Iranian regime to offer to broker talks between Iran and President Trump. And isn't this now time to draw to the United States' attention what the true nature of their new friend in Moscow actually is?
Well, I know that he speaks with great wisdom on these matters, so let me just simply say that I completely agree with his analysis on the depth of the relationship with the United States. The truth of the matter is that all of our constituents are kept much safer because of that partnership arrangement that we have with the United States and with other 5 allies. That is the most important security relationship we have. It's one that we need to invest in for the long term, and I can give him an assurance that that is what we will do.
Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I warmly welcome the statement that the Minister's made today. He will probably be aware that our close allies in the United Arab Emirates at the start of this year prescribed 19 organisations for their links to the IRGC and to Iran. 8 of those organisations are headquartered in the UK. Will he therefore give a commitment to the House not to take action today, but will he review what has been decided by our allies and take action to prevent those organisations operating terrorist activities in the United Kingdom?
Minister.
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising what I think is a very important matter. I can say to him that I was in the United Arab Emirates on Friday, so I am very well versed in the points that he has made. I think I have responded on that particular issue in the House previously, but given him assurance that we'll look very closely at it. I'm very happy to discuss it with him further.
Can I thank the Minister for his very diligent turn at the dispatch box this afternoon and allow a few moments for the front benches to swap over.